If you're new to us, we dive into a recap of each episode of Critical Role to get everybody on the same page before we go into our actual discussion. And we cut that recap out of our podcast and host it separately on YouTube for your convenience. So if you happen to find yourself on that recap video and you're interested to hear Blake and I's full thoughts on the episodes, we will link that down below. But without further ado, let the recap begin. Once again, this is episode 48, An Exit Most Fraught. So we pick up basically with immediately Fern making her first death saving throw. Because if you'll recall, she got knocked unconscious at the end of last episode, and she fails this death saving throw. So the party has basically rushed into this nearby like forest thicket, and they are just hiding under their hero call veils, which are the things that make them invisible, but they cannot move. And they're basically like, okay, what do we do? Because they have like the entire Unseelie army after them, basically, and they're in like a really precarious position. FCG does flip their Changebringer coin, which has become like pretty standard for them.
It's kind of meme-ish now.
Yeah. Trying to decide if they should heal Fern or not. Like risk like moving and taking an action. It lands up on yes. So FCG heals Fern. She comes back to consciousness. And then they're like, okay, like, what do we do? They discuss, you know how Critical Role is. They plan. But Imogen ultimately ends up using her catapult spell to launch something basically like in the far opposite direction to try to cause a noise over there to distract them. She does that. It works. And so they basically, start trudging along during this opening. And as they're trudging along, the Gloamgut, which I'm just going to call GG probably from here on out for simplicity's sake, lets out another breath attack. And the way this is working is like they're all looking for Bell's Hells this whole time. And the GG is like going to still be attacking. And Matt is basically basing it on the group's stealth checks. Like if...
Right.
For example, like if somebody rolled beneath a 10, Matt's going to consider that big arcing breath like happens to find them as they're hiding type of thing. So one of these breaths that gets let out ends up hitting Laudna and FCG, and this knocks Laudna unconscious. FCG is able to bring her back up, and the GG didn't like actually find them in that moment, so it's still circling around. And at this point, Chetney pulls out the horn that he bought from the Trove of Marwa back at the start of the campaign.
I love the callbacks, man.
Yeah, me too. And he blows a sound into it, which basically it like throws the noise somewhere else, kind of like a ventriloquist. Excuse me. And that again works just like the catapult, and attention shifts over to there. So the party's kind of continuing this like move a little bit, hide under the veil, move a little bit, hide under the veil. And they eventually get to these watchtowers that they saw last episode that has like the light radius that is like a sentry tower essentially. So now they're having to navigate these as well. There's a little bit where the iron tithe comes back into play. The ground kind of like starts to suck up Imogen, but they are able to get past that. And the party's like in rough shape right now. Like Imogen doesn't have any spell slots. So she uses some of her sorcery points to get back third level so she can cast message to Nana Mori. And she just says like, hey, we're in trouble. We really need your help. We need to find the exit. Like, where is it from where we are? And she kind of explains where they are. But there's no response. So Orem kind of hikes up a tree and trying to look for this Fey gate that Morgan had told them about. And he thinks he knows the direction they need to go. So they start, more trekking, more stealth checks. While the GG is circling and getting closer and closer. When it's getting real close, all of a sudden this massive hawk-like creature slams into the side of it. And the two like crash. And they can see that it is Mori kind of like riding this hawk. And she's just, arrived to help them. And at one point, like they crash over the side of a mountain and they're like, this is our chance. Like, we got to go. And Fern's like, Morgan will be okay. She's killed, far bigger things than that. So they make their way to this bramble where they think the Fey Gate is. And there's this monstrous, like, cyclop creature that comes out with, like, these 4 huge arms and no feet. But it has this, like, air of regality about it, and introduces himself as Terosh, the Lidless Slumber. And he speaks entirely in rhymes and basically asks the party, like, why have you come? What favor do you ask? And this whole section is great, and I would highly recommend, like,
It's amazing.
if you're watching this recap and you didn't watch the episode, at least go
Yeah,
back and watch this section.
it's so good.
Yeah, because my recap's not going to do it justice. But essentially, what happens is, since he speaks in rhymes, the party must also speak in rhymes back to him. And every time they don't, he grows like larger and more menacing, and like he starts salivating. Matt describes, and so they have to type in rhymes, and they also have to offer something like a little trinket or a little item. And once they do both of those things, he allows them to pass through the Fey Gate. And everyone, doesn't really have an issue with this except for Imogen, who is like really struggling with rhyming and also deciding what to give him. And they're like, "We found Laura's weakness."
Yeah.
It was great. Fern is the last one through, and like just as she's going through, the GG is like swooping down, like having found them, but she makes it out. On the
So
other side of
freaking
the
good.
gate, it was amazing. On the other side, they regroup and they quickly realize they're in the Talent Highlands close to Galvan, which is Imogen's hometown. And they basically debate, should they go there or not.
Right.
Imogen is really hesitant. Everyone else is like, we should go there, but she thinks there's nothing there for her. But the rest of the party thinks it'd be good to just at least go to a nearby city, so that way they could get the airship or potentially Plane Rider Rin, like a distinct location to come retrieve them from. They take a short rest, and during this time, Matt has Liam and Marisha make a bunch of D20 rolls with no explanation. We might talk about this in the episode, so I'll save it for then.
Yeah.
They then decide to take a long rest. And during that time, Imogen messages Rin, catches her up to speed. She is currently spying on the Exandrian Malleus key and tells her that there's another group checking out the Shadowfell one as well. And Imogen's like, okay, hey, here's where we are. We might need you to come get us. And basically, like, as Rin is responding, she's like, oh, crap. And like the message goes dead. And they're like, oh, hopefully that's okay. So she then messages Captain Xandus and tells them, hey, we're going to be going toward Galvan if you can come there to pick us up. Kind of as like a backup, since they didn't really hear from Rin. Everyone is going to sleep for that long rest now. There's one last conversation, though, between Orym and FCG, where Orym basically is just checking in on FCG and making sure that, even the helpers need help. Just kind of making sure his friend is okay. And they have a little bit of a heart-to-heart. And that's where we go to break.
It's 12 days from the apogee solstice. Rin is not responding. They do send a second message to her, and Rin does not respond. And Orym kind of makes a joke about, like, she might be dead because every time we message someone and they don't respond, they have been dead. But Rin's like a massively powerful character, so they're like, she's probably going to be okay. Well, since they can't get Rin to come help them, they do decide, okay, let's go to Galvan. And like Will mentioned, there's a lot of tension's not the right word, but there's a lot of like just debate around, is this the right move? Because they're adding up like the days to make it to that Exandrian Malleus key. And they think it's going to be about 7 days to make it there, maybe less. But in general, they just know that this is all going to be very close over the next several days. All that to say, before they head to Galvan, they do decide to do a shared dream experience, because they have found out that they can, through Imogen's dream, they can essentially scry on another location. So they do shared dream. It's Imogen, FCG, I think Ladna, and Chetney.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember who else was present.
I think it was just them.
Okay. So they do this shared dream, and they basically go, as they're floating orbs, to the Exandrian build site of the Malleus Key. And some things that happen there. First of all, they notice these large, powerful golems that Matt describes as being unlike what they've seen before. FCG is going to look a bit closer at one, and though he hasn't seen it before, or it's not necessarily like, oh, this is a blank, there's something incredibly familiar related to the technology of those golems and he himself. So possibly both pre-Calamity. They also do see the Malleus Key that is sort of entrenched up against this large spire. And it looks like the excavation crew is digging these large control arcane rods like deep into the earth, which Travis picks up as being possibly like a failsafe, just more energy conduits to keep the key from being destroyed, like what's happened in the Feywild. As they're looking and kind of seeing all of this, they also see a certain person petrified as a statue at the center of it, and it is Planesrider Wrenn, who, like I mentioned, has been petrified. So they're like, that's not good. Okay, let's get out of here. But before they can leave, they draw the attention of a certain Adahan Thul, who somehow seemingly is able to see them. And Adahan is going to do a psychic attack on both FCG and I think Imogen. It does 36 points of psychic damage, and everyone wakes up. And not only do they wake up, Matt just explains that those two characters have, it almost feels like a hangover, like a headache, like they're sore in their mind. And either both of them or just FCG starts the day with a point of exhaustion.
I think it was Chetney and FCG, and they both got the exhaustion.
Yeah. So both are exhausted, have a point of exhaustion. The party continues to go to Galvan. Immediately, this small farm town is put off by this group that's walking through. And basically, their plan is to find Imogen's dad, and then hopefully, if they need, they can connect to Master Fairmore, who is this merchant who's sort of well known in the area of Marquette. All that to say, Xandis is actually arriving around this time with the massive skyship. They realize, you know what? Let's just talk with her dad, kind of have a heart-to-heart, and then we can move on. They do go to her dad's like sort of stable or like farm area, and we have a really tough conversation where Imogen is like, "Hey, Dad," and he's like, "Oh, hey, why are you here?" Just not the warm, cozy father we would probably hope to have.
Yeah.
And she basically says like, "Hey, why didn't you tell me my mom was alive? Like, what happened with you guys?" And her dad is basically like, his name's Relvin, by the way, is basically like, she may have always had her powers, but I think she left because she was more interested. I think he says like she cared more about curiosity than what we had, or something like that. Like this itching need to know more about herself than sort of stay with the family. And from that, it's just a really tough conversation. I will say Relvin does give her a kind of like a little locket with seemingly her fingerprint pushed into. It's like a metal locket thing with like a fingerprint in it, and there's an inscription in it that reads, I think it was, two halves make a better whole, implying like now we're like fuller, more whole now that we've had Imogen. It's just really sad. She does see her horse Flora. I can't remember if I'm missing anything else from this conversation other than just sad.
Yeah, not really. Just they wanted something that like was Liliana's to like help them connect to her. So I think that's why he got the locket.
That's right. And he also, it's funny, they had also asked him like, before he gave that to them, they asked like, is there a favorite song that she loved? And I was kind of envisioning like in the epic battle, would they have sung it to her? I mean, I don't know. But right, so they get the locket, and then they head to Xandis' ship, and there's no skyport here, so there's just this small farmland with this massive skyship setting in, and the party makes their way. But
making the way.
That's that is what happened in episode 48 of campaign 3 of Critical Role. So
boom, boom. Yeah. And again, if you're on this recap video, check down the description box for the link to our full discussion. But with that being said, let's jump right into it, I suppose.